So today we're going straight into the freezer and refrigerator and use what we've got to make a good pot of stew. Now I had 2 chuck roasts out in the freezer, and one of them, it's still just a little bit frozen, but it'll be easier to cut that way too. But you can use a chuck roast, and I bought these on sale. In fact, it was cheaper just to buy the roast than it was to buy stew meat, because they charge you for cutting the meat up. So we're going to cut the chuck roast up in bite-sized pieces. And you can see it's got quite a bit of fat in it, but that's okay because that's going to give that stew a lot of flavor. I'm going to cut them up probably in about 2-inch pieces, because as I cook, and we're going to be cooking this stew in the oven, not on top of the stove. So the meat will shrink just a little bit. So I want them to be pretty good size. So let's get the rest of this cut up. Okay, we got it cut up. You can see I've got it cut up in pretty good size pieces. That's pretty good manly size pieces there. Because like I said, after it cooks for a couple hours, they're going to shrink. Now I like to season my meat. I'm going to put some garlic powder, some salt, and some pepper. And since this is going to be more of a Italian stew, I'm going to use my Italian seasonings. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and season meat just a little bit more and stir it up good. And what we're going to do is I'm going to turn my big stew pot on, and I put some olive oil in the bottom of it. And I'm going to sprinkle my stew meat with some flour, and I'll have to do it in 2 batches, but I'm going to brown my meat. That's going to give your meat a lot of flavor, and it's going to seal in that flavor and them juices. But you don't want to do all of it at once. You want to do about half of it. That way you'll get each piece good and brown. So we'll get it in the pot and brown it up. Now when you're browning meat, you want to make sure that you don't overload your pot, because what that does is it causes it to steam instead of brown, and that's not what you're wanting. Just put a single layer in there on the bottom. That way it'll get good and brown. So I'll do it in 2 batches, and we'll get it done. Now here's a few things that I found in the refrigerator. Of course, I've always got onions. So I cut up an onion. I've got some carrots here, some button mushrooms, and I've got some red and green bell peppers. So I'm thinking, we'll make an Italian stew, because a lot of these ingredients you would use in an Italian dish. Now let's go over the rest of our ingredients. I've got 6 cups of beef broth. I've got about 5 medium potatoes cut up. Of course, my stew meat. I've got 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes. If you don't have crushed tomatoes, just use whatever you got. And here's my veggies that we went over a while ago. I got 2 large garlic cloves that I cut up. I got salt and pepper. And I've got my seasonings picked out I'm going to use. I've also got a little can of water there to rinse out my tomato can. I've got thyme, I got rosemary, I got some fennel, and I got some bay leaves. I've got some oregano from the garden last year, and my garlic. And So now we're going to get the rest of all our ingredients in the pot. And we'll get it in the oven. That's why I like doing the oven stews, because I can put it in the oven and go on about my business, because I'm going to leave it cooking for about 2 hours. So, you know, if I had it on top of the stove, I'd have to watch it and worry about it. And this is just, to me, this is just easier. And it comes out tender and juicy and just really good. I do a lot of my stews this way. Especially like a deer stew where your deer meat's kind of tough. It does a really good job with that. So when you're cleaning out or eating out of your pantry, your refrigerator, your freezer, and not going to the store, you know, soups and stews is a good thing. So you can see I've got my pot pretty full. So it'll make a pretty good sized pot, and we can eat on this stew for a couple days. And you can put any kind of seasoning you want in it. I just thought, with what I had, you know, an Italian stew just sounded so good, because I just love those kind of ingredients. Now, I could have left out the potatoes, and maybe after I cooked it in the oven for a while, after a while I could have put some pasta in it. That would have been good, but I was kind of wanting some potatoes. Now we're going to put our beef stock in here, about 6 cups. And I will be putting the recipe down in the description box for you. And y'all are real good, because I'm telling you, I get sidetracked sometimes and I'll leave an ingredient out, and y'all are so good about remembering and helping me make sure that I've got all my ingredients down. I'm going to put my 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes in there. And if you don't have crushed tomatoes, maybe you've got whole tomatoes, maybe you've got diced tomatoes, just whatever you got. I use a lot of crushed tomatoes in a lot of my dishes. And just stir it up good and get everything kind of distributed through your pot good. And I'm going to season, just put a little bit more seasoning in here. Put a little bit more garlic. I know y'all think, my goodness, Miss Lori, you use a lot of garlic, and I really do, but it tastes really good, and we just love garlic. In fact, I'm going to be making garlic bread to go with our soup or our stew. But I've got some different spices that I'm wanting to put in here. We're going to put about a teaspoon of thyme. I love putting thyme in my stews and soups. I just love thyme. And this is fennel. And whenever I'm making any kind of Italian dish, or when I'm making Italian sausage, I use fennel. It's got a really sweet licorice taste to it. So I think it'll be good in the stew. And I use about a half a teaspoon. I'm going to put some rosemary, and I've got put some oregano in there. And I think all these spices make the stew taste really, really good. I like to season my food really well. There's a lot of these spices that are really, really good for you, really healthy for you. So use them if you got them. And rosemary is one of my favorite spices. So I'm going to stir all this up real good and get it contributed all the way around. Now this is going to cook down a little bit, but that's okay. If you want to, you put just a little bit of sugar in there just to cut the acidity. Put a little bit more salt and pepper. And I've got a couple bay leaves that I want to use. I use bay leaves in all my stews, and I use bay leaves in my spaghetti sauce. So we're just going to put a couple in here. Not going to crumble them up, just put them whole. And it's ready to go in the oven. 2 hours. My oven's going to be 375. So 375 for 2 hours. Okay, it's been 2 hours. I got it out of the oven, and it's good and bubbly. And what you're seeing on top there is a little bit of olive oil, and probably from some of the fat that was in the meat. And just stir that up. But everything looks like it's cooked real good. It's feeling tender. Peppers are good and done. Potatoes feel good. See with the carrot. Carrot's tender. Potatoes tender. So I think it's pretty much done. Looking good. It smells wonderful. You know, I was thinking if I'd had some pepperoncinis, I'd have put them in here, a couple in here too. Look at that. It looks good and hearty. And cooking it this way in the oven, with it didn't get mushy. Everything's still, you know, in good bite-sized pieces. And I've got some basil here, fresh basil, that I julienne. I'm going to put in there. Just kind of let it do its thing, give it that good basil taste at the end. So our stew is done and looking so good and smelling wonderful. So all we got to do now is make a little bit of garlic bread. And there's one of the bay leaves. I probably won't find the other one, but Mr. Brown will probably find it, I'm sure. But yeah, a little bit of garlic bread and some Parmesan. We're good to go. Boy, that makes a pretty bowl of Italian stew. We're going to top it off with a little bit of Parmesan. And I think Mr. Brown might like it. What do you think? He's got him some garlic bread, and he's good to go. So what do you think about that Italian stew?
What do I think about it? I think it's absolutely too hot to eat, but it is delicious.
Dip your crusty bread in there. Talk about good.
Oh,
Garlic bread.
I'm going to. Oh, that bread's light.
Pretty good stuff, huh?
Absolutely delicious.
Can't go wrong with a good stew. God bless everybody.